Over at Dropsite News, we've published a unique new piece of investigative journalism by reporters Yunus Tarawi and Sammy Vanderlip. They were able to obtain reams of social media posts from soldiers and officers inside a single combat engineering battalion known as Battalion 749. The unit has been operating in Gaza on and off since shortly after October 7th and has left an unusually large amount of destruction in its wake. What makes this reporting unique is that by relying on the battalion's own social media posts, we can trace their path through Gaza, identifying specific acts and linking them to specific actors by name. At one point, the battalion even put together a montage of their destruction and began it with a little homage to Disney. Now we can play this here, but we're not actually going to play the clip because we're afraid we'll get a copyright takedown, which would be just extraordinarily ironic and a weird testimony to what you're able to do on the internet. But let me just say that doing this kind of investigative work is extremely resource intensive. And if you can help by becoming a Dropsite subscriber, either free or paid, and support Breaking Points while you're at it, go to breakingpoints.com for that. Go to dropsitenews.com. Counterpoint subscribers can get a discount, 20% off at dropsitenews.com/counterpoints. Now, look, in mainstream Western media, the coverage of Israel's year of scorched earth destruction often touches on the victims and events happening in Gaza in the passive voice. Death and destruction befall Palestinians the way a city suffers from a hurricane or an earthquake. Though in those cases, actually, the media has little difficulty identifying the natural disaster as the cause of the destruction. When it comes to Gaza, it's even worse. Buildings mysteriously explode and people just die for no obvious reason. Rarely do we see the Israeli military identified as having carried out the act, and never do we see individual members of the military named and identified, their actions described in detail, broken down by unit and task. In fact, doing so in Israel is illegal. The stated rationale for that censorship is operational security. But according to a report from Israel's Channel 13, the real aim is to dodge accountability for war crimes. If that's true, the soldiers themselves work against this cover-up on a daily basis, posting endless photos, videos, and montages from the homes and neighborhoods of Gaza they are razing. That's where this investigation begins. Yunus and Sammy have managed to find and archive all the Instagram stories and daily posts shared by the soldiers of Battalion 749. They've mapped out the structure of the unit and identified the individual soldiers and officers involved, along with their various roles in operations. They have tracked the activities of each company in the battalion, including what they were doing when and where as the force shred its way through Gaza. The mission is nothing less than a systematic, concerted, and deliberate effort to erase the intellectual, cultural, and social future of the Palestinian people. Quote, "Our job is to flatten Gaza," the soldiers of the official D9 company of the battalion wrote on their Instagram page. They added accurately, quote, "No one will stop us." You likely heard about some of the atrocities described in this article in real time. And if you follow our work here on the Breaking Points channel, learn of the impact on the Palestinian population. But now you can see it from the perspective of those carrying out and reveling in them. The investigation is a thorough accounting of the acts committed by the 749 Battalion, complete with the evidence they post themselves. These are not just isolated events, but represent a pattern that runs through the very heart of the Israeli military, a sadistic attitude toward the civilians of Gaza, whose futures they have been tasked with blowing up or flattening. Now, if sadistic sounds harsh, go read through the report and ask yourself if it's not, in the end, too soft of a description. From the beginning of the Israeli invasion of Gaza, you may recall Benjamin Netanyahu's ominous invocation of the biblical Amalekites. When Netanyahu made that remark, the notion was already in the air. On October 9th, Lieutenant Colonel Adi Bakore, deputy commander of Israel's 749 Combat Engineering Battalion, posted on his personal Instagram account, quote, "Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy everything that belongs to them. Do not spare them, and put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys," unquote. Now, many of the unit's members liked the post and proceeded to put it into practice. 749 Battalion was among the first to enter the strip through the Netzarim corridor, the 4-mile-long road separating Gaza City and Deir el-Balah that Israel occupied early in the war in order to divide the north and south of Gaza. After helping them cement control of South Gaza City, including the Netzarim corridor, the battalion later advanced into areas like Shujaiya in Gaza City, the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza, and even Rafah. Currently, 749 Battalion is operating in North Gaza and Jabalia, where even following Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's killing in southern Gaza, Israel's campaign has intensified to the point of executions and depopulation. There, 749 Battalion is seemingly racing to destroy as many buildings as possible. As one soldier put it, quote, "We will leave them nothing," unquote. The images in this investigation come primarily from the battalion's private social media group, which Dropsite News gained access to, as well as the profiles and accounts of dozens of soldiers from various companies within the battalion. By stitching together the information shared within the group, we were able to clearly map out the unit's organizational structure, identify over 100 of its members, and document their activities in the Gaza Strip in detail. Now, in December 2023, Company A of the 749 Battalion was tasked with rigging up the South Gaza City campus of Al-Azhar University with explosives and detonating them, reducing Gaza's second largest university to rubble. First Master Sergeant David Zoldan, the operational officer of Company A of Israel's 749 Battalion, wrote in an Instagram post on December 20th, quote, "On Shabbat, we loaded the mines and I signed off on the shipment with a modification due to the sanctity of Shabbat. A few days later, we assembled them and booby-trapped one of Gaza's symbols of the future, Al-Azhar University, in the northern part of the Strip and blew it up," unquote. Zoldan, a reservist who normally works as a journalist at ICE, a local Israeli news outlet, attached several photos and videos of the entire operation, quote, "from the unloading stage to the massive explosion," unquote. In one of the videos, he cheers as the three buildings of the university campus are prepared to be blown up. Quote, "This is the explosion before redemption, December 2023, he says. As the university is blown up, Zoldan tells his fellow soldiers, quote, "Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Did you see? You can hear it here." Zoldan did not provide a military justification for the explosion, and the Israeli military have not reported to have found anything in the university campus. 749 Battalion, he wrote after the explosion, quote, "is working day and night and performing holy work in the Gaza Strip," unquote. Other soldiers from the battalion made no effort to conceal their intentions, gleefully mocking the destruction of civilian and educational property. Maya Radazowitz, another soldier in the 749 Battalion, was among them. She filmed the explosion of Azhar University, captioning it, quote, "Goodbye to higher education in Gaza," unquote, with an emoji of hands in the form of a heart.
Dom! Dom!
She is one of 27 soldiers that we have identified as being deployed to blow up Al-Azhar University, including Roy Wicks, who fights with an American flag patch on his sleeve and who helped plant explosives that led to the destruction of the institution. From there, Dropsite tracked the unit through the rest of its campaign through Gaza. Many of the social media accounts we used to obtain footage have since been deleted, but you can read the full investigation from Eunice and Sammy and see the rest of the videos over at dropsitenews.com. Now, in response to our request for comment, the IDF said this. In response to the barbaric attacks by Hamas, the IDF is working to dismantle the military and administrative capabilities of Hamas. In complete contrast to the deliberate attacks by Hamas on Israeli men, women, and children, the IDF operates according to international law and takes possible precautions to reduce harm to civilians. The IDF acts to address exceptional incidents that deviate from the orders and expected values of IDF soldiers. The IDF examines events of this kind, as well as reports of videos posted on social media, and handles them with command and disciplinary measures. In cases involving a suspicion of a criminal offense arises that justifies opening an investigation, an investigation is opened by the Criminal Investigation Division. Upon its conclusion, the findings are transferred to the Military Advocate General for review. It should be clarified that in some of the examined cases, it was concluded that the expression of or behavior of the soldiers in the video was inappropriate and it was handled accordingly. Now, Emily, they didn't tell us specifically which of the incidents were handled in that accordingly fashion. But I think what's important to understand is that the key when it comes, because I'm sure what a lot of people are thinking are, where's the International Criminal Court and where's the International Court of Justice? You know, if we, or a nonprofit news organization, with the help of some freelance reporters, can put together this, certainly the ICC and ICJ can do it as well. So what's going on here? And you see in that response from the IDF, part of the explanation, as long as there is a legal process in a state, in a government, to provide accountability to war criminals, then the ICC and ICJ don't have jurisdiction. Like that's the setup. So the deal basically is, okay, we're going to have these international courts, but if you have a sufficient domestic court that prosecutes people, then we're going to stay out. We're going to allow that to unfold. And so while Israel was going through that debate over the prison guards who were accused and then later charged of raping Palestinian detainees, that the internal debate was from defenders of the criminal charges. They said, look, we have to charge them. If we don't charge them, then the ICC and the ICJ come in.
Yeah.
We have to have a process.
Right.
And their defenders were saying, screw it, we'll take them on.
That's why I think this case study is sort of a really sad but interesting window into the post, and the invocation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is such a good example of how this is a case study on the incredible failures of global liberalism or post-war global liberalism, where, like, I agree with one thing you said in here where you described this as a pattern. I mean, clearly, this is not fringe. This is not, nut picking. This is a obvious established pattern. And it's also not surprising that it's a pattern, because this is how people react when their husbands and wives and brothers and sons and family members are killed and their countrymen are brutally slaughtered. This is, of course, how people react. It doesn't make it right. And what happened after Hiroshima and Nagasaki is that we implemented a liberal world order to help not allow retribution like this to happen on scale in international relations. And you're citing Old Testament verses about the Amalekites and all of that. I mean, this is just the way we decided not to do war after World War II. And Israel says that it holds itself to the highest standards. And it clearly holds itself to higher standards than places like, I mean, if from Hamas, you see a lot of this happening out in the open. You hear a lot of this conversation happening out in the open. At least Israel purports to have some type of shame about it, but in a way that makes it worse, because they're the ones enforcing or are a part of the liberal international order.
And what this shows is that there really is no shame on the ground among the officers and the soldiers. And that we
That's a great
from
point.
Outside this can have these debates over, well, is this a genocide, is it not a genocide? The clear intent of the soldiers and the officers carrying out is genocidal, toward the cultural and social and political institutions of the Palestinian people. Like, they're not talking about the militarily eradicating them. They're talking about just rooting them out.
You're talking about ethnic cleansing.
Root and branch, a complete and total ethnic cleansing. They're very clear about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, in a sense, it's one of those really difficult questions of how people who wield standards of international law, like the U.S., will wield these standards of international law in one way towards Putin and in another way towards Israel, are struggling to meet their own standards, and in some cases don't even care to meet their own standards.
Yeah. So who do we have on the Friday show?
We have Michael Knowles on the Friday show, which is going to be very interesting. We had Matt Walsh a couple weeks ago, so we'll do a couple Daily Wire guys ahead of the election. But one thing I'll say about them is they're willing to chop it up. So I imagine we're going to chop it up with Michael, because I can't think of two people with further differences or greater differences than you guys.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We have a weekend segment, right, that's going to post as well.
Yes, over at Counterpoints. We're rolling out the Palestine Laboratory as a 4-part podcast series by Anthony Lowenstein, based on his his book by the same name. This is updated post October 7th. We'll have a segment that we'll post on the weekend in an interview with Lowenstein about this podcast. And basically the Palestine Laboratory is about how the Israeli military cyber industrial complex uses the Palestinian people and the occupied territories as ways to experiment with new weapons and then markets its products as having been experimented on human beings and therefore more effective than the competitors.
Well, I look forward to that. So everyone stay tuned. BreakingPoints.com for the full premium version of the show early with no ads. Make sure to subscribe there to support us as we head towards Election Day. But thanks everyone for tuning in.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to BreakingPoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.